And while the political world fixates on polishing their campaign strategies, put on the back burner until the campaign dust settles is the work they were elected to do, and that's creating policies and passing legislation that addresses the pressing issues facing the U.S. today. The latest example, the Cybersecurity Act of 2012, had the full backing of the White House and appeared to have bipartisan support. It's referred to by lawmakers as critical to America's national security and appeared to have struck a balance between cybersecurity and protecting people's privacy. That bill is now on hold after complaints by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and other lobbying groups. Corporate lobbying groups, that is, but that's not all. Legislation on student loans, transportation, corporate tax reform. It doesn't look like anything will happen until the election is a done deal. So as long as campaigning remains top priority, what does that mean for the American people? To discuss this, joining me now is Brad Friedman, investigative reporter for bradblog.com. Brad, welcome. So it seems...
Hey, Liz, how are you?
Doing well, thank you. Seems like politics paralyzes policy, or at least during an election year. Shouldn't it be the opposite?
No, it's sort of bizarre this year. Not only does it paralyze the election season, but the election season has pretty much been for the past 2, 3, maybe arguably even 4 years. I mean, this has been a strategy, I'm sorry to say, by the Republicans to essentially break Washington and then go out on the campaign trail and argue that Washington is broken, so hire us to go back and fix it. We've never seen anything. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this before.
We have a clip of Representative Charles Rangel talking exactly about this. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I think, like the Nancy Pelosi said, we should be optimistic. We should try to get the American people to understand that we're paid to do a job and not to be locked in concrete. But close to 4 years ago, the Republicans made up their minds that they were going to destroy the president and not to support any of his programs. Now we're reaching the end of that. A lot of things are supposed to happen before we conclude our business, but you can bet your life the Republicans are not going to do anything this president would do in providing jobs and equity tax reform, and it's going to wait until after the election. They are just not going to do anything except to make America in worse shape than we are economically, and that is wrong.
And what do you think about that, Brad, the congressman there, saying that the GOP is putting politics before, the well-being of our country and just trying to block any progress whatsoever in hopes of not letting President Obama get reelected?
Yeah, well, not letting him get reelected and making the economy worse in every regard. I'm glad to hear that someone in Congress finally saying that. Frankly, the Democrats and Obama should have been saying this for years. They've known that this is the strategy. That's why all of these bills are being pushed back. They may or may not be dealt with in the lame duck session after the election. But this has been the strategy. And it is working, by the way, for Republicans. They've had an unprecedented number of filibusters in the U.S. Senate. And the media, the corporate media, has gone along and sort of helped the Republicans by going out every time the bill is blocked by a filibuster. They'll say Democrats failed to pass such and such bill. No, they didn't fail to pass the bill. It was blocked. It was not allowed to come up for a vote in the first place. And so I don't think it's been made completely clear to the American people just how broken the system is currently in Washington and exactly why it is broken. We still have a media who's sort of, saying both sides do it, the Democrats and the Republicans, they just can't get along, they need to compromise. No, that's not the case. Very clearly, this is a strategy by the Republicans, and it has been for years. Why the media hasn't been out there reporting it that way, well, I can't tell you.
Well, Brad, we are kind of seeing the effects of this because in the past year, there was 151 laws that were enacted. But this number, it includes relatively insignificant things like naming courthouses and other government buildings. But other more pressing issues like immigration, corporate tax reform, those bills, they don't seem to get very far. So, Brad, what does this have to say about their priorities?
Well, it has to say that they're currently the Republicans want to win elections, period, end of story, and they will say anything to do that. Yes, they've been passing all kinds of big government abortion bills. That's what the Republicans have been doing in the House while they're pretending they're against big government. That's the sort of thing that they've been passing. They are willing to watch this country go down the tubes. They're willing to watch record unemployment, record heat spells and everything else, a drought, and do absolutely nothing about it. And they're just banking, they're gambling that the American people are going to be either dumb enough or misinformed enough to to go along with them and to blame this all on Obama and on the Democrats and to put Republicans in place. There's also one other thing that the Republicans have done that I think has sort of boxed them into the corner. They've been spending the last 2 or 3 years pretending that regulations are a bad thing. So now, if there's any bill that needs to be passed, they're going to hear about it from their own, Republicans are going to hear about it from their own people, their own constituents complaining about these bills. I mean, God forbid the Republicans end up winning in November. I don't know how it is they'll be able to govern. I don't know how you run a government, without passing laws that include, regulations and stuff.
And, this is, meanwhile, members of Congress, they are now taking a 5-week vacation. This amid the gridlock and these pressing economic issues you just mentioned. I mean, is it really time for them to take an extended break?
Well, yeah, this is what they do. This is what they always do traditionally. This is what they always do. And hey, listen, it's also, it's silly season. It's going to be traditionally, that's the case between now and a presidential election. So it's not, entirely surprising. I think what is so surprising is sort of the unprecedented way in which this has happened, the unprecedented number of bills that are going to have to be passed, that are looking at deadlines. But, if you look back over the past 2 or 3 years, pretty much nothing has passed in this Congress unless there was an absolute deadline. And even in those cases, we're talking about, seconds before midnight, when the debt ceiling is about to expire and things like that. So nothing is going to happen until there is a deadline, until lawmakers have figured out there is no other way to avoid taking action.
All right, Brad. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. That was Brad Friedman, investigative reporter for BradBlog.com.